Hello and welcome to the Microsoft Build podcast. The podcast is to talk about the recent Microsoft Build flagship event for developers. We thought we would just give you some updates on what stuck out to us, some of the key announcements, some of the partnership announcements, and then just chat about some of the future events that we've got coming up. So my name's Ryan Littlemore. I'm an Azure Infrastructure specialist in the UK. I'm aligned to media and telco and professional services customers. I'm joined by Mark and Margaret, or Mags as we call her. Max, do you want to do an intro?
Sure, Margaret Orton. I'm App Innovation Specialist. I work in financial services, and today I'll be talking about the announcements around application innovation, application development on Azure.
And I'm Mark Henry. I'm the data and AI guy. Again, working closely with Ryan in the comms, media and telco environment.
Fantastic stuff. So, we obviously the three of us work in the Azure space, but we're also going to talk about some of the announcements to Teams, M365, the PowerPlatform as well. All of the announcements are kind of linked with developers as it's a developer conference, but there's some really kind of interesting announcements in the data and some of the infrastructure side as well that we'll go through. Before we start digging into the detail, I just wanted to call out a key strategic announcement that Meta have made with Microsoft and Azure. They've selected Azure to be their strategic cloud to help with accelerated AI research, which I thought was pretty cool. They're going to be using around 5,400 GPU cores for AI research, and it's great to see that they've selected Azure as their strategic cloud. So, by the way, everything that we're going to talk about will include links to as part of this podcast, and also something called the Book of News, which summarizes all of these announcements as well. So, if you want to dig a little bit deeper into anything that we're saying, we'll include that as well. So let's kick off with the Azure announcements, and particularly on the app dev side.
Yeah, let's start with apps. Azure Container Apps is now generally available. So what it means is now you can run microservices and containerized applications on a serverless container platform which is fully managed. So for developers, it means that they can deploy containerized applications without having to manage complex infrastructure. You can write your code using preferred programming language or framework, build microservices, you have full support from Data, you can scale dynamically based on HTTP traffic or events powered by KDEV. Great announcement. The next one is around Spring Cloud. Azure Spring Cloud, a fully managed service from Microsoft and VMware, is now generally available. So this is a PaaS service for Spring developers. Solves the challenges of running Spring apps at cloud scale, removes all the need to worry about infrastructure, application lifecycle, monitoring, any container intricacies, and Kubernetes.
So the service was launched in 2019, but it has expanded massively in its functionality, and Microsoft is now renaming it as Azure Spring Apps. This is how you will see it being addressed.
So just so I can understand that correctly, so it's basically like a fully managed development environment for Spring apps, right? So you don't have to have you don't have to build anything to be able to create these apps. It's just there as a PaaS service.
Yeah, definitely. We're supporting Spring developers. All Spring apps now can be hosted on Azure on PaaS service, which brings loads of great features. The other update that I found quite interesting was around Azure App Service bulk migration. That is part of Azure Migrate. So now this is in preview, and this is a really great capability because it makes it possible for customers to not just discover and assess .NET web apps, but also they can categorize these applications, see if they're ready for migrations. So the service will suggest which SKU for migration to use, and will provide guidance content how to migrate to Azure App Service.
That's very cool. Do you know if you need an agent or anything to deploy that, or does it just look at the web front end to be able to do that analysis?
No, you will need to deploy an agent to do that.
Okay, cool. There's also some exciting updates around the developer productivity space, right?
Yes, at Build we announced Microsoft Devbox. And this is a cloud service that provides developers with self-service access to high-performance workstations. These workstations can be pre-configured, ready to code for specific projects, all while maintaining security and corporate governance. You can see the demo, it's available today, but public preview is coming very, very soon.
That's really cool because I think that sits on something that we recently announced called Windows 365, which in turn is underpinned by Azure Virtual Desktop. So it's great to see the power of our VDI capabilities, both in the subscription model and an infrastructure layer, coming to the dev world as well.
Absolutely.
I saw some demos of Code Spaces too. I wasn't sure what it was. What's Code Spaces for?
So Code Spaces is an online development environment. It is hosted by GitHub but powered by Visual Studio Code. So it allows you to develop entirely in the cloud, gives developers a consistent development environment in just minutes. So that's why we saw lots of demos built in Code Spaces. It's really easy to clone the repository and start coding right there in the browser.
Brilliant stuff. Mark, should we talk about some of the data announcements? Because I think there were plenty of them.
Yeah, there was a load of stuff on the data side, Ryan, as you say. And I think it was really, the primary thing was the announcement on the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform. And it's this whole, the challenge of data, insights into the hands of decision makers. Developers are challenged by that. We've still got the challenge of siloed, fragmented data, right? So it's difficult to get that speed and agility of innovation. You've got data engineers, scientists, business analysts. They're trying to integrate, they're trying to warehouse the data, they're trying to run ML over it, right? And that's just hard, right? So it's really having that consistent data ecosystem. And that's where we're coming from with the latest announcements from Build, which is demonstrating Microsoft's continued innovation and investment in our data products and in our data ecosystem. Ultimately, this is going to really unlock those predictive insights and also provide that governance and confidence going forwards in terms of data provenance and all those sorts of gnarly and challenging issues.
Cool.
I mean, some of the stuff that came out is pretty exciting is Azure Synapse link for SQL. Mm-hmm. Really, this moves one of the barriers I talked about, actually the one of data movement. Effectively, you'll be able to put a data pipeline, think about it as a data pipeline, to Azure Synapse Analytics that gives you near real-time SQL Server interrogation, if you like. And, this can be used for advanced analytics with no performance impact on that operational data store. So carry on running your transactional systems, carry on running them at scale, don't implicate them, but run analytics on them at the same time and get that, really powerful, useful information. It's going to make things like recommendation engines. It's going to make things like personalization. All of those signals are going to be able to be tracked really quickly, and responded to in the moment, which I think is really, really powerful.
That's a really amazing hybrid capability of SQL Server that's just baked in there. And we've seen this with Windows Server before with, integrating with Azure Backup and everything natively. We're seeing this come to the new version of SQL Server. And I guess with that Synapse link, you could be running SQL Server anywhere and get that capability that's run in Azure, right? So those SQL servers could be on-prem, in other clouds, wherever they are, you're getting Synapse capability straight out the box. And
bear in mind, this functionality isn't new, right? We announced it, 18 months ago, nearly 2 years ago now on Cosmos DB. Again, for the very same reason. Multimodal's got to be available all the time, it's got to be up all the time, with 5 nines, but you still want to be able to generate the reports. And that's really where Synapse Link was born from in the early stages. So I think it's just widening that footprint and just making it more available and making those sorts of services available. The other thing is that, SQL Server 22, that's just been released into preview. And again, our most cloud-enabled release yet. So the performance, the security, the availability, all of those features, Azure Arc innovation, as well as a business critical service, that's GA. So, again, you can run these workloads in a hybrid and multi-cloud environment and be able to get all that richness of the management plane and so on around that, which I think, again, is super important. Some interesting features in SQL database, right, as it sort of steps up to the mark again. What new could we do? Well, I've got to say, for my money, the ledger feature's pretty cool. And now I don't need to think about how I'm going to put some sort of decentralized blockchain model or technology around Azure, around SQL. It's there, right? I can build it within that environment. So I get the benefits of blockchain in a fully managed SQL environment. So pretty powerful stuff. A couple of announcements around Azure Cosmos DB. I mentioned it earlier, but burst capacity, elasticity, not having to really worry about those cost spikes potentially. Now seeing that I've got that capability to really keep me optimized all the time within that world. So again, flexible optimization service tiers, which are going to protect my investment and make sure I make the most of that. Something else that was quite neat, I thought, was Microsoft Graph Data Connect, and this is connecting, or rather exporting securely, that whole Microsoft 365 data estate. That's only available on Azure, right? So that means then that customers can unlock those sort of actionable business insights, right, about what we do as employees and customers and collaboration data and how we work together. That could be really, really powerful, right? That Microsoft Graph thing we all know is very powerful, but being able to get under the covers of 365 and be able to play around with that data is pretty powerful. And the last one from me is just really, we're back to Mags's point, I think, around PowerPlatform and stuff like that. We're really making stuff available and easy to use. So data marts in Power BI. So you can create and craft a data mart. Sub half a terabyte, but probably don't need more if you're hypothesizing, playing around with data sets, want to do some stuff, just to find out whether or not something's going to fly. Great way of being able to do some early incubation innovation activities. So again, data marts for Power BI, go check it out. I think that's really powerful as well. And maybe we'll come back to some of the AI ones in a minute after you talk to us about some of those infrastructure advances.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. The ones that from the infra side that stuck out to me was something called Azure Stack HCI Single Node. So if you're not familiar with Azure Stack HCI, basically it's a way of extending Azure out to your edge locations. So basically you deploy some hardware. We've got a lot of partners likes of Dell, Cisco, HP that can deploy Azure Stack HCI for you. It will give you a local instance of Azure, and you can run Azure services in your data centers. So this is really useful for developers that need, low latency connectivity to Azure. You could also use Stack as a dev environment, and then moves to the public cloud instance for production. And when Stack went live, we had a really cool use case around things like oil rigs or, containers and things like that, or ships in the sea, where they had basically run in a disconnected state. It allowed people to use Azure services there. So we recently announced the capability to use Azure Virtual Desktop and Azure Stack. Kubernetes app services supported as well. So yeah, really a wide range of service. The announcement is around something called single node. So basically you can get all those Azure capabilities on a single piece of hardware. Now, traditionally, you'd need a minimum of 2 for resiliency, but what you're doing with single node is you're using some of the inbuilt resiliency for things like RAID disks or, aggregated network cards. But what it allows you to do is have a smaller footprint. It's cheaper because it's a single piece of tin, and it's for applications like retail stores. Places where they need small compute that's Azure controlled, and this fits into Azure Arc as well. But they don't need the resiliency because some of it will be tiered to cloud. So storage is a good example of that as well. Mark and I work with media customers, and we're looking at using Azure Stack as a way to ingest content, do some transcoding in a disconnected state where they have very low connectivity in production shoots where they're filming in the desert and things like that. So that's a really cool capability to bring Azure Stack HCI to more applications.
Cool. I guess one of the other things that I kind of didn't mention, which is pretty important, is the whole data governance bit. So I think that's top of mind for everybody at the moment. We released Purview again probably about 18 months ago. That product's like moving at 1 million miles an hour, and just fantastic work coming from that team. We've just released dynamic lineage for Azure SQL database. That means we enrich that Purview data map with details from actual runs of SQL and SQL stored procedures. So not just seeing the end data item through to surfacing in something like Power BI, but understanding some of the business logic that may be encoded in there as well within the stored procedures. So really, really powerful kind of capability. And we've also announced data estate insights, and again they'll be generally available in the coming months. That's really where you start to see lots of value in terms of your compliance strategies and so on. And I guess I mentioned AI briefly. We've we've brought out these responsible AI dashboards in preview. Satya mentions it in his keynote. And this is really where customers can easily debug machine learning models, really, making it a lot easier to have that model interoperability, if you like. Think, Data Explorer with ML, looking at error analysis, confactual, casual inference analysis, all of those things that are difficult things to do. Again, being able to have that responsible model around it and understand through a scorecard, what your model performance and insights look like. So that's a really great advance.
One thing that Satya did in his keynote was that, I think it was with Autodesk Maya, where it was like natural language and then gets translated into some of the code behind it. I think that's something that's really going to come on leaps and bounds, particularly in the developer space as well, where you don't have to be a developer to be able to code apps. You can just talk in natural language and you get that translation below.
Absolutely, and you can also get some help for professional developers, like for GitHub Copilot. We see those capabilities when you can write the text that will be converted into code, which is really cool and really empowers people to code faster.
And I think the stuff you talked about there is sort of a lot of the work we've done with OpenAI. Again, something that came along a couple of years ago, that we've been working very closely on this whole GPT-3 capability at scale models, that service now that supports Maya also does things like making sense of unstructured data, capabilities for building new apps in Maxis World, for instance, use cases such as writing assistants and stuff like that. One of the ones that I also love is cognitive services for language. So think about summarizing documents, summarizing knowledge bases, and putting that in the hands of your call center teams and folks, allowing really, really fast response on summarized information, as opposed to having to trawl through lots of deep, detailed contextual stuff. So again, I think that's just, as you say, coming on leaps and bounds, lots of innovation there.
Very cool. And then on that theme of AI, a new capability that's in preview for Azure Monitor is something called AI Ops powered smart maps. So this is something that fits into application insights that helps you spot performance bottlenecks or failure hotspots across an app. It's using our AI engine to just diagnose that stuff and surface them quicker, rather than manually having to look at things like utilization stats and where people are hitting links and they're slow to respond. It will do that kind of thinking for you and surface the issues straight away. So I thought that was a really cool feature that's come to Azure Monitor.
Really great updates in Azure space. Should we move on to discover what was announced in wider Microsoft products? Yeah,
absolutely. So I think there's a few kind of developer-based updates around teams and how developers can collaborate with each other.
Yeah, and not just developers, actually. So there is a new collaboration experience in Teams that is called Live Share, that enables participants to interact in new ways with the apps that you can share. So it's not just you're sharing your screen, you can share an app. And for the apps that are built with live share capabilities, you can stage this app, and it allows applicants to annotate, edit, zoom in and out, and interact with shared content. There is also new extensions to Teams SDK now available in preview that allows vendors and developers to build this live share capabilities into their applications. And talking of toolkits for developers, so we announced Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio that enables developers to create, build, debug, and publish applications for Teams across web and mobile devices. And this really saves developers time by automating all the configuration that you might need to do across portals, cloud resource templates. It has good continuous integration, continuous delivery workflows all integrated. So you can see these new capabilities, and Teams Toolkit make really life a lot easier. So you can bring your existing application into Teams, because Teams really becomes this big application where everything happens, where you collaborate, which is where I spend most of my time in. So it's really great to have this capability to bring applications, your existing applications, and build new applications and bring them embed into your Teams environment.
That's really cool. And I love the stuff about the live share experiences, allowing developers to collaborate all over the world. Moving on away from Teams, we've got some updates around the M365 stack. So one of the ones that jumped out to me was something called the App Compliance Automation Tool. Sounds a bit dry, but basically when the third-party software vendors want to create apps or integration with the M365 stack, they have to go through a compliance process, which is manual, in order to become certified to use their ISV product in M365. There's now an automatic tool basically that validates all of that, gives you that certification. So giving developers and software vendors that ability to bring their products into M365 quicker and easier is something that will really make the platform a lot more, rounded in terms of all of those additional features that you can add. And then lastly, there was a few updates around the PowerPlatform.
Did you see that now we have a fifth product in our Microsoft Power Platform family, which is called Microsoft Power Pages. And this is not just for low-code makers, this is for professional developers as well. This is where you can quickly create business-centric websites, easily deploy them, they will be scalable, they will be secure. And also we introduced Express Design. This is a new feature for Power Apps, permitting users to build applications from images and directly from APIs.
Awesome stuff. So that was kind of our roundup of all of the stuff that we thought was interesting. There's a bunch of updates that we may have missed, but include links to the book of news, which contains all of this stuff. And actually, it's only next week till the next Microsoft event, which is called Envision. It's going to be hosted by Accenture and Avanade. It's on June the 14th. Register to get access to that as soon as it becomes available.
It'd be great to see what the partners do with a lot of the announcements that have been coming out, obviously. I'm sure they're at the front end of turning those into new applications for our customers. So I think that'd be an exciting event.
Yeah, customer stories is always a highlight
Absolutely.
for me from Envision, so can't wait to see that. But thanks for listening, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks all.
Thank you.